welcome you to our lecture number 4. The topic of our lecture is general medical psychology. The main components of the general medical psychology are attention, emotions, memory, and feelings. Besides it, we will discuss today psychology of consciousness and psychology of personality. So, the objectives of our lecture, first of all, to learn the main role of attention and its relations, relations of attention to other mental functions, as a memory, as a thinking, as a consciousness, emotions, and so on. The next objectives of our lecture to get.
Excuse me, madam. Madam, sorry for the interruption. Today at 5 o'clock, we have a meeting with Mr. Mohammed. So Vice Dean asked me to inform you that lecture, ask you to finish the lecture before 5 o'clock.
Okay, will it, understood. I understood you, understand, sorry. Will this lecture or meeting will be in the Zoom or it will be?
Zoom, madam, Zoom.
Zoom. Okay, don't worry, we'll stop before 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you very much, madam.
You're welcome. So, what we will do else? We will overview the other mental disorders and disorders associated with pathology of attention, and of course, we will discuss the different methods of examination, attention and examination of memory and emotions. First of all, about a definition. How we can define attention? Attention can be observed as a concentration of consciousness on a chosen object or phenomenon. And also we can define attention as a result all these objects, phenomenon, or subjects is reflected clearly, so using our consciousness and attention. In contrast to cognitive processes like sensation, and perception, attention doesn't have its own content. Attention depends on another cognitive processes, and attention can be characterized by dynamics of physical processes, and attention depends on these physical processes. And very often when we analyze attention with some another cognitive components, for example, thinking, or for example, level of IQ, intelligent, yes, or emotions, and so on. So attention reflects in its nature. It is direction to the object, is a specific response of an organism to some changes in the environment. And these changes are of importance for a person, very important, and whole person mentality, his behavior, his consciousness depend on these changes. There are several fundamental theories of attention. First of all, we should remember about our greatest physiologist, psychologist, yes, Pavlov, who considered specially directing sensors analysis to perception of objects. And this analysis occurs creating a nidus of optimal irritation on the corresponding area, part of the cortex, to be the basis of attention. As a result, temporary nervous connections are easily formed. At this time, neurons in other areas of cortex are inhibited. Irritations which get into inhibited areas don't create temporary connections, and a man doesn't notice them. The nidus with optimal irritation is intensified by attendant irritants and inhibits reaction which are not connected with activity of dominating center. So it's the basis idea of Pavlov's theory about attention. Now let's discuss quickly what kinds of attention can be. First of all, of course, it is involuntary attention, so post-voluntary attention, voluntary attention. Involuntary attention, this kind of attention caused by objects, specific phenomena or specific kind of activities, which influence a man with their brightness, with a force or dynamism. It's involuntary attention. Voluntary attention is directed by a man with a volitional effort according to the conscious purpose. This kind of attention, voluntary attention, occurs when someone tries to fulfill some tasks and tasks. And post-voluntary, when we speak about post-voluntary attention, it's necessary to say that during his activity, I mean human's activity, yes, the person can become engrossed in his work to such extent that there will be no need for directing his attention. In this case, voluntary attention gains some new features. Being conscious and purposeful, it absorbs a man at the same time and supports itself involuntarily. So this kind of attention we can define as a post-voluntary attention. And of course, there is a specific form of very special kind, of attention called awareness. Awareness, it's like a beam of active attention which enlightens for the consciousness some aspects of eternal world or internal processes to be perceived brightly and sharply. In the field of awareness could be only one object. It could be a phenomenon or a process, a thought or idea. And this main idea, for example, is moving constantly to cover the multiplicity of processes, or this activity can cover these processes. Very often when we are much more aware of external events and pay little attention to the internal, to the intrapsychic events, and these events can lead us to the disorders of physical homeostasis and further development to neurotic states or some disturbance in normal mental activity. When we speak about attention, it's very necessary to characterize attention. How we can characterize attention? There are four main characteristics of attention. First of all, it's the volume of attention, then stability of attention, then concentration of attention. The fourth one is switchover of attention. The fifth one is selectiveness of attention. What it is volume of attention? We can define volume of attention as the amount of information the person can have in mind at any one time or at any one kind of activity, so period, yes? It's a volume of attention. For example, the amount of our lecture, how you can perceive the information and how can you use them safe and so on. The stability of attention. Stability of attention is specific psychological phenomenon which reflects the ability for constant mind concentration at something. It's your duration, yes, of concentration. How long can you control the attention and work in a very high level of concentration? It's a stability of attention. And concentration of attention, it's specific psychological phenomenon which characterize the degree of mental effort to keep something or, for example, information or kind of activity or subject in your active attention, in your work level of attention, so concentration of attention. The selectiveness or electiveness of attention with specific psychological phenomenon which characterize the ability for productive concentration on particular object or event, and at the same time person will ignore the unimportant irritants, unimportant information in this situation, this condition. It's a selectiveness of attention. And the last one is switch over of attention. Switch over of attention, it's psychological phenomenon. Wait a second. Psychological phenomenon which characterize the rapidity and productiveness of attention, attention changing the object of concentration, how quickly and how good can you change your activity from one kind to another, and how quickly, for example, how quickly can you find different the answers for different questions, how quickly can analyze literature and use your phone and so on. It's there are 5 characteristics: stability, selectiveness, concentration, switch over, and volume of attention. What about characteristic of attention? The characteristics of attention can vary depending on several criteria, and they can depend on them. First of all, it's awareness and general characteristic of organism, of person actual condition, his health, his age, his gender, and so on. Then the next group of criteria includes circumstances of the person's activities. Then the next criteria is a person's estimation of situation, his activity, his actual activity in this period, in this moment. How we can analyze attention for clinical purposes, in clinical experiment, psychologists usually examine attention using specific materials, special experimental psychological methods. And these psychological methods, there are a lot of different methods, tests or scales or tables as you want. And all of them can examine some characteristic of attention or whole characteristic of attention. There are like a complicated form of test or more specific for one kind of characteristic of attention only. There are let's begin from the Shelter Table Test. Shelter Table Test, or another name, figure searching test, was made by French psychologist. His name is Shelter. This method is consists of 4 tables. The size of each is tables over 20 centimeters till 20 centimeters, and each of them divided into 25 equal checks. The example of the classical form of Shelter Table Test you can see in your screen. In those checks, the figures from 1 till 25, they are printed randomly, and the patient takes instruction to find, to show, and to call the figure in necessary order. Why necessary? Because there are several combinations. We can choose the direct order or opposite order according to our purpose, according of our exam, about according patient condition, his age, his occupation, and so on. But More often, of course, we choose the direct order to find, call, and show numbers from 1 to 25, one by one, of course. While the patient walks, doctor must analyze criteria. Next criteria, first of all, time which patient needs for finding a whole table. Besides it, doctors can fix and of course analyze the amount of the number and the quality of mistakes. But in the Shelter table test, very seldom when clients, patients, they can make they can have some mistakes, yes, but if he did this mistake, of course, it's you should analyze this condition. It can be a reason for this. How psychologists, doctors can diagnose exhaustiveness. He can diagnose exhaustiveness if the time intervals during the test are gradually increasing. This, I mean, not time intervals, I mean the time for tables, yes, which patient needs for each tables for results. Then the number of the mistakes during those intervals is gradually increasing, and seriousness of the mistakes during the test gradually increases. These are three main criteria for Shelter table test. Next form, Shelter-Gorbov test. Shelter-Gorbov test, or another name, Platonov Shelter test. It can be there is a specific difference between Shelter-Gorbov and Platonov Shelter test, but it's better to learn about Shelter-Gorbov test because it's more useful and more simple, at the same time very informative test, yes? So Shelter-Gorbov test. This test is equipped for examining the patient's ability to switch over his attention. Very specific test, only for switch over of attention. This table is approximately 25 to 25 centimeters, divided into 49 checks. In the checks of this table, the figures of two colors, black and red. They are printed randomly, and the patient, during this test, the patient is instructed to find, to show, and to call the figure of those ranges parallelly. First way, parallelly black and red numbers, for example, one black, one red, and so on, or more complicated variant, more difficult variant, when patient will find, show, and call black numbers in direct order and red numbers in opposite order. Like one black, 24 red, two black, 23 red, and so on. In Shelter-Gorbov test, there are several principles of fixing the data in this test. They are: the time intervals needs for finding every 5 figures. The next one, the amount of task the patient could carry out during every 30 seconds, and the number and the quality of the mistakes. For example, patient has problem with the color or with the numbers, and they must be analyzed, and these results can be used when we calculate the final formula for attention. So the psychologist can count the specific formula, quantitative, which characterize the ability of attention to switch over. In your screen, you can find this formula. Yes, and when patient counting the results, if he is the quantity is more than 70%, the ability to switch over is one of the good level, and if the results is less than 50%, the ability of switch over decreased, and the psychologist must choose another test more deeper analysis of his attention. The next form, Bourdon test or proofreader test. Proofreader test. For this test, the psychologist must have specific blank with a horizontal line of letters which are printed randomly, one by one. In this blank, for this blank, there are several specific characteristics. First of all, the blank must contain several letters looking like a little bit like one another. For example, O and C and E, like this, yes? Or these letters must have the similarities like P and R, M and K, and so on. And besides this blank, the total quantity of the same letter in each horizontal line just be the same. The same letters must be on different position in different horizontal line. The client, the patient must be instructed to look through all this blank line by line, from the left to right, crossing out the particular letter in each line. Of course, psychologists will choose this letter, this symbol, or besides letters can be symbols, or just shapes and so on. And while the patient is walking, every 30 seconds, psychologist must draw the line, and later when the client will finish, the psychologist must fix these 30 seconds intervals, and besides it, psychologist will fix the numbers and the quality of mistakes the patient has done in this test. So this information about Bourdon test, yes. When we speak about next test, the serial of countdown. The method of serial countdown, very useful and very informative and very simple test at the same time, yes. The patient in the serial countdown, the patient is instructed to count down from 200, there is a mistake, from 2000 by 7, or from 100 by 3. The patient must tell the psychologist only the intermediate results, making the operation into his mind, and orally will answer only the results. While the patient is counting, the psychologist must carry out the approximately point chronometry. What does it mean? Must put the points on the blank in constant rapidity and distance. And it will help for him to fix at the same time the intervals, and besides these intervals, a psychologist will analyze the mistakes, the numbers, and the quality of the mistakes. And this is in the serial of countdown, psychologists must analyze results. I will just summarize for you that the time intervals, the distribution of the mistakes while carrying out the test, and the quality of these mistakes. So these are characteristic for all tests is the same. Yes, the time, mistakes, numbers of mistakes, and the quality of the mistakes. Next, cognitive components, memory. Memory is a form of mental reflection of the reality, and with its help, early acquired data. Besides this, we can define memory as a specific knowledge and events are fixed, kept, and recreated. The human memory contains two types of information. It is specific memory, which has been has been accumulated in the process of evolution for many thousands of the years, which is determined by unconditioned reflex and instincts and heritable and aspired. And the second form is quiet memory. In the heritable and quiet memory is the process of human life which realized in conditional reflex. So specific memory and acquired memory, two forms of basis of this classification of the memory. The basis of the human memory and its psychological mechanisms contain the system of conditional reflex, forming temporary conditions or traces, processes occurring in the nervous system, which were studied in detail by Pavlov and his scientific school. Of all the present theories of memory, chemical theory has the biggest influence. According to this theory, impulses coming from the peripheral toward the brain cortex cause changes in the chemical composition of the nervous cells. In the RNA plays a major role in the processes and ending and decoding of data, as well as placing it for storage. This is the basis theory of biological theory, Pavlov's theory. Memory consists of several processes. There are memorizing, there are reproduction, retention, and forgetting. Now, memorizing, or another name, fixation. Acquisition of information. Very simple definition. Yes, acquisition of information, that's all. Next one, retention. Retention can be defined as the processes of keeping information. Reproduction, specific processes characterized by getting information from the storage to use. And forgetting, the last one, processes is forcing out the information which lost its agency to the latent layers of memory, or perhaps the complete destruction of all the information. So there are four main processes of memory: memorizing, retention, reproduction, and forgetting. According to these processes, we can define memory into several forms, types of memory. According to participation of analysis and functional systems, there is a visual, oral, olfactory, sense, tactile, emotional, and mixed memory. For example, memorizing images and emotional stress, complex actions, and etc. This is the first kind of classification of memory. According participation of the signal system, we can define memory into image memory and verbal logical memory. Image memory, it's a first signal system, is the memory for the image or sounds or smells or activities and etc. Verbal logical memory, this is the second signal system. Verbal logical memory means the memory for the words, for the judgments, and etc. Also, we can classify memory according to the mechanism of memorizing. According to this mechanism, we can speak about mechanical and verbal logical memory. Mechanical memory, it's mechanical memorizing of information, for example, phone numbers or material without support of semantic associations, and so on. It's a mechanical memory. And verbal logical memory, when patient memorizing the information with support of semantic meaning and internal logical connection. When we try to understand the principle of this activities or this information, this subjects and so on, and you will remember them according to the main logical association. The next form of classification of memory, when we classify memory according to the degree of involvement of active attention and volition. Volition, yes. Here we can speak about involuntary and voluntary memory. There are some criteria of attention when we speak about attention. So involuntary memorizing and reproducing, it's involuntary memory, and voluntary memory, it's purposeful memorizing and reproducing. This is the main components of this kind of memory. Also, we can classify memory according to the place and role in the structure of activity. Here we can speak about operative kind of memory, short memory, and prolonged memory. When we speak about operative memory, we can define it like a short storage of information, which is necessary for achieving the defined aim or goals, and loses its urgency after achievement of the task. It is operative form of memory. Short memory. When we speak about short memory, we should discuss it as a memorizing for a short time, 5 minutes, several minutes. For example, 5 minutes ago, your friend told you some information and you can't remember it now. Yes, of course, problem with your short-term memory. And prolonged memory, it's specific memorizing from your childhood, to specific knowledge from schooling, from school time. For example, ability and practical skills for a long time, and so on. It's a prolonged memory. When we speak about next form of memory, which depends on to the degree of use of memorizing means, we can speak about two forms. It can be mediated and immediated memory. What else about when we there are a lot of different different forms of memory, and some kind of classification depends on psychological knowledge, psychological formulas and definitions. Some of them defined according to nosological form of pathology and so on. What about examining of memory? There are a lot of different tests equipped for the examining of directive memory, but the general principle is the same for all these tests. What's about general principle? The patient must remember the specific range of several symbols. And the second stage, he must create sound combinations of figures and so on. The principle is the same. The psychologist should be able to estimate the volume or the other parameters of directive memory. And this is the main principle for examining memory for this test. So let's discuss quickly the most important forms of the psychological test. First of all, the test of remembering 10 words or just 10 words test. For this test, the psychologist must prepare the specific table with the 10 words. The requirements, words must be chosen from the maximally different spheres for the patient to remember them only directly without grouping into the memory dusters according to the meaning. for another thing, it must be easy for the patient if his mental processes are not highly stable to slide out of the range of correct words according to some habitual associations. For example, window, door, brother, sister, water, fire, and so on. So, 10 words test. During in the time when patient will work with this test, psychologists must analyze, repeat this test 4 times, usually 4 times, and psychologists must fix the results after each patient's remembering. So this is the main principle of 10 words test. The instruction for patient, you can see in your screen. I think it's not need to read. You can make photo and use this instruction. So 10 words test. For conventional fixation of the results, the psychologist can make up in his register special table, special blank. For example, looks like this. Yes, consists of the 10 words, and for repeating of this words. After 4 readings, for better imagination of the results, it is possible to make up the curve of remembering. This curve of remembering helps us analyze next parameters. First of all, the volume of directive memory and the curve of remembering. In your screen, you can see the example of this curve, how it can look like. Yes, results of growing up, exhaustive readings of these tests. But unfortunately, we don't have so much today, so much time to discuss these curves, but I hope that in the classes we will discuss with you. What else? The next method is Wechsler subscale test. Wechsler subscale test, or another name, subscale of Wechsler adult intelligence scale. That's the whole name of this test. Can be used as one of the methods for examining direct memory. For this test, the examiner must prepare 2 groups of figure ranges, and the groups of figure ranges contains the ranges from 1 till 9 figures. Of course, it must be 2 parallel groups of the figure ranges. Memory for subscale, the scale, sorry. Sorry, the head of department, give me 1 second. Okay, let's continue. So the scale of directive memory by Wechsler test. The psychologist reads the first range of 3 figures from the first group of ranges, and the patient is instructed to repeat this range first in direct order, then in opposite order. If the patient was successful, the psychologist reads the next range with the 4 figures, and so on. If only psychologist finds the level at which the patient cannot repeat the figures in direct or in opposite order, he must give the patient the range of the same difficulty, I mean the same numbers of the symbols, from the parallel group of the ranges, from the second one here, yes? If the patient was unable to remember it, again, the psychologist must esteem this level as the maximal one. For future analysis and comparing it with statistical norms, the psychologist must count the balls, points, yes, characterizing volume of directive memory. It is the sum of the numbers of figures in the lines the patient could remember in both direct and opposite order. For example, the patient could remember 10 figures in direct and opposite order maximally. It means that he has a maximum level of memory. The next the next type of psychological experimental methods for examining mediated memory. There are a lot of methods of examining mediated memory, but the general principle is the same for all of them. The patients must choose something, for example, picture or object or some meaningful logical connection and connection with this object, yes, and it's one of the methods helping to examine both the ability for mediated memory and the quality of the associative process, the methods of pictograms. The method of pictograms, the psychologist gives the patient a pen and a list of paper and instructs him. I will read you words meaning some concepts. You are to make up some simple drawing to look at in future in order to remember the word. You must not use letters or any other abstract note, abstract words, symbols, yes, and so on. The psychologist must prepare 2 groups of words for the patient's remembering. First group contains more concrete words, and another one contains more abstract concept. This is the method of the pictograms. Wait a second, I have prepared the instructions. Where is my examples? Oh, I forgot about examples. In the next lecture, when we will discuss thinking, disorders of thinking, I'll show you the examples of the pictograms methods. Now let's quickly discuss emotions and feelings. Emotions are the subjective states of men and animals which arise up under the actions of external and internal irritants and expressed as a direct expressing satisfaction or no, fright, gladness, anger, and etc. They are, emotions, acting important part in the teaching process, executing the role of negative or positive reinforcement. Emotions are instrumental in making of biological activity forms of behavior and removal the reaction, losing the biological value. So, classification, how we can classify emotions. Basic and complex categories where some are modified in some way to form complex emotions was described by Paul Ekman. In one model, the complex emotion could arise from cultural conditioning or association combined with the basic emotions. Alternative, analogous to the way primary colors combine, we call like a primary emotions, could blend to form the full spectrum of human emotional experience. For example, interpersonal anger and disgust could blend from the contempt. It's a primary emotions, primary kind of cognitive processes. Next forms Robert Plutchik. Robert Plutchik proposed a three-dimensional circumplexes model, which describes the relations among emotions. This model is similar to a color wheel. The vertical dimension represents intensity, and the circle represents degree, or like this, degree of similarity among the emotions. Robert Plutchik, posited 8 primary emotions, dimensions arranged as a 4 pairs or of opposites. Some have also argued for the existence of meta-emotions, which are emotions about emotions. Here inside you can see, yes, meta-emotions. It's a very widespread form of circumplexes model, the Plutchik. What else? Emotion we can use, of course, we can examine emotions, and there are specific tests. First of all, it's a patient examination. Keep to the attention mimic peculiarities, face expression. On the patient's skin may be scars as traces or of their depressive or affective suicidal attempts, for example. The next one is conversation. Conversation, we mean ask about patient's mood. It may be very important to observe for mimic and pantomimic of the patients during all period of examination and conservations. And you know that this information can be more informative for us than the results of this test. Also very important, additional dates may be received by means of conversation with the relatives or his colleagues or other patients who are friends for him, and so on. There are many indirect methods of investigation of emotional functioning, such as 5-point scale, measures of anxiety, state trait anxiety inventory, Beck anxiety inventory was created by Beck, and hospital anxiety and depression scale anxiety. There are more useful and informative scales, test for examining emotions. We will try to discuss some of them. Yes, 5 minutes more. First of all, it's a 5-point scale. In the incredible 5-point scale created by Carrie Dunn Buron and Mitsu Curtis in 2003. This simple scale can be used to teach social understanding and provides a visual representation of social behaviors, emotions, and abstract ideas. The incredible 5-point scale allows abstract concepts and feelings to be made visual, concrete, static, and personal. Once a behavior is identified, it is task analyzed or broken into concrete parts. Each part is assigned a number and or color. When in collaboration with the individual with ACD, these parts are assigned as a label. The incredible 5-point scale promotes self-management of behavior and emotional regulation. Next one, what time? 5 minutes more, okay. What's the most interesting for you? State and trait anxiety inventory or Spielberger test, very commonly used measures of trait and state anxiety. It can be used in clinical settings to diagnose anxiety, and it's very often when we use this scale to diagnose anxiety. This test has 20 items for assessing trait anxiety and 20 for state anxiety. So summaries of 40 state items for this test. And examples of them you can see in your screen. Yes. So I just summarized 2 forms of anxiety: assessment trait of anxiety and state of anxiety. Higher score indicated great anxiety. The state is appropriate for those who have a list of 6th grade reading level. What else? Range of the score on each subtest is from 20 to 80. The higher score indicated great anxiety, and there are several ranges for this anxiety. To analyze it, if we will have time in our class, I will explain you. For adults, this measure requires over 10 minutes like this, not more, to complete this test. And this state trait anxiety inventory has been translated into and adapted in 48 languages, so you can find in your own language and use it. Now it's 5 minutes. Next lecture will continue with back anxiety inventory, hospital anxiety inventory, and we will discuss with you consciousness. What is this consciousness? What the phenomenal consciousness can be, subconsciousness, examination of the consciousness, and a very interesting personality. Yes, what does it mean personality? What traits of personality can be, and so on. So I forgot about your names. Please write down in the chat your name and your group number, and you can go to the meeting with your dean. If you have some questions, of course, you can ask me. Who wrote down his name? Of course, you can turn off Zoom and begin your meeting with your dean.